Let me ask you a question. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, over 400,000 KGB agents holding top national secrets. If everyone were laid off overnight, he didn't even have money to buy a single piece of bread. What will they do? Don't be fooled by jokes online. I thought they had all obediently gone to drive taxis. The truth is 10,000 times cruel than the joke. When these 400,000 fierce beasts completely lost their chains, they directly compared Russia in the 1990s. It turned into the most surreal black-to-black feast in human history. Today, let's give it a smack. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, where exactly did those 400,000 KGB went? In fact, they never died with that empire. Instead, it transformed into three extremely terrifying undercurrents. In the most cruel and humiliating way, it completely reshaped Russia's fate. Let's start with the first underlying current. They are also the most poignant group of people, a down-and-out person crushed by the times. Right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the newly appointed Yeltsin was extremely afraid of the KGB. He didn't dare to keep this colossal creature as a whole, so he struck with ruthless force. The KGB was directly dismembered into the Federal Security Service. Several organizations that were not subordinate to each other, such as the Foreign Intelligence Bureau. Not only were there massive layoffs, but their food supply was cut off directly. Countless veteran agents who have devoted most of their lives to intelligence work. Overnight, he was kicked out. What's even more fatal is this. It was the shock therapy that was disastrous in early 1990s Russia. The ruble has depreciated to an outrageous degree. The lifetime savings of ordinary people. Overnight, they couldn't even afford a bus ticket. A KGB major who achieved great military merits in the country. Monthly pension. You can't even afford a low-quality sausage from the streets of Moscow. To keep his wife and children from going hungry. These were once fluent in 4 languages. An elite who masters the ultimate kill in a single hand-to-hand combat. He could only take off his yellowed old uniform, running to the streets to resell low-quality cigarettes. Serve as a driver for the nouveau riche. A driver for the nouveau riche. He even stood in the cold wind, shedding tears, selling his Red Star medal, and the collapse of faith, often more deadly than physical hunger. When these agents discovered Western capitalism that he had once swore to eliminate, now, he has become the father of Russian officials, whom they all admire. Their mindset was completely twisted. The most magical scene at the time happened at the CIA. Moscow is divided into battles, the era of able to fight, top secret intelligence that Americans couldn't obtain even if they spent millions of dollars. Now, every day, former KGB agents come knocking on their doors. They sell cabbage like a lot, listing the Soviet Union's overseas covert list, the identity of a double agent. They even took out top-secret blueprints of nuclear facilities and sold them cheaply. The bottom line is only a few $100s in exchange, or a few plane tickets for the whole family to the United States. The 2 words loyalty. In that era when even meals were barely enough to eat, worthless and devalued. But this is only the misery of low-level agents. Let's look at the second underlying current. They were also the most terrifying group in Russia in the 1990s. They chose to go into business, but what they do is not harm. It was a sea of blood. Early 1990s. Russia has begun a frenzied privatization of state assets. A few are bold. The oligarch of Luzy, at extremely low prices, put the country's oil in the country. Mineral resources, bank. He had completely drained his own wallet. But do you think seizing these assets is the end of it? In that wild era when guns spoke on the streets, you have money in your hands. It's like having a torch on your head. The oligarchs desperately need their enforcers, and those street thugs who only knew how to hack wildly with watermelon knives. It's basically useless. So the oligarchs set their sights on the laid-off KGB. These oligarchs are not just about hiring a few bodyguards. They are investing heavily. The KGB's Economic Intelligence Bureau, which once specialized in investigating economic crimes, and the Ninth Bureau, responsible for national high-level security. They dug them in as an entire group. It directly turned into his own private intelligence network. They exploited the national eavesdropping network held by former agents, archived black materials and tracking methods, to extort politicians, kill business competitors. It was once a thunderous tactic used to deal with Western spies. Now, all of it is used to seize territory, robbing banks, and those agents who were not favored by the big oligarchs. They have taken an even darker path. They directly joined the Russian gang. This became the infamous prisoner of war gang. This was definitely a tactical downgrade strike against the traditional underworld. When KGB snipers have undergone rigorous national training, after the demolition expert and psychological warfare master joined the gang, gang fights on the streets of Russia. It was directly upgraded to special operations. They don't play street fighting at all. Instead, they are running a chain of schemes to launder cross-border money. He knows better how to use car bombs. Let a person vanish from the world without a trace. Those years on the streets of Russia, bankers were blown away almost every week. A high-ranking official was assassinated on the spot. This group was once the nation's sharp sword. It became a crime that terrified all of Europe. Syndicate. They used the murder tactics they learned from the state. Turn your head. It fiercely draws the blood of this weakened nation. Speaking of which, do you think the KGB is completely useless? Or become a beggar? Or they have become lackeys of the oligarchs? Or become a mafia boss? If history really stopped here, at best, the KGB is just a joke for the loser. But history may not be what you think. There is also a group eyeing the throne of power. This was the KGB's third undercurrent. Those who remain within the system. The madly patient guardian. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, the newly established Federal Security Service of Russia, Yeltsin was so suppressed he couldn't lift his head. The budget was cut to pieces. Agents even have to cover their own fuel expenses for business trips. Those senior generals who once wielded great power in the Kremlin, now even a nouveau riche oligarch dares to curse them right in the face. It's so humiliating. But the group that stayed behind didn't leave. They understand the rules of the game of power all too well. They know that no matter how much money the oligarchs hold, it was nothing more than rootless fooping. As long as the state machinery remains, as long as the intelligence network remains, one day, they will reclaim everything they lost. They hid in the shadows like a pack of hibernating wolves, coldly watching the oligarchs perform wildly on stage, watching the country suffer and be on the brink of collapse, watching the people utterly despair from such chaos. They are waiting for a porch that can regroup them, waiting for a legitimate opportunity to take over the country. Time moved to the last day of 1999. Ill and desolate, Yeltsin announced his resignation on television. The baton of power was passed to a young man named Putin, and Putin's background is familiar to everyone. A former KGB lieutenant colonel, he once undercovered the intelligence station in Dresden, East Germany, for many years. After the breakup, he once fell so down that he even considered driving a taxi. The moment Putin ascended the presidential throne, those intelligence agents who had been enduring for nearly 10 years, finally, he bared his fangs. They quickly assembled. A new system later became known as Sirwiki. That is, a large political bloc of powerful personnel from the department. They mercilessly dealt with those arrogant oligarchs. Sent Khodorkovsky to prison. He forced Berezovsky into exile abroad. Then it cleanly and decisively took over Russian energy, the lifeblood of military industry and finance. According to later statistics, among Russia's senior bureaucrats at the time, more than 70% of the time, they all have backgrounds in intelligence or the military. Can you believe it? The KGB that Yeltsin had personally smashed back then, after enduring 10 years of humiliation, after division and downfall, he actually pulled off the most incredible desperate comeback. They did not die. They simply took off their old Soviet-era uniforms, wearing a high-end custom suit. He openly walked into the Kremlin. It has once again become this vast land, the true master. Looking back at the ups and downs of the fate of these 400,000 people, it really makes people feel stifled. They were once the most loyal believers in the world. He swore to defend the country called the Soviet Union with his blood, but when the country abandoned them first, when faith shatters like glass in the face of reality, the evil in human nature erupted in them, more deadly than any enemy. This is also a historical milestone. There is never a natural devil, nor is there any statue that is truly indestructible. When the avalanche of the times crashes down, even the hardest knife of the past, it can also twist its blade and transform in desperate situations. They even turned around and cut their own compatriots. Today at Lubyanka Square in Moscow, still bustling with traffic, the collapsed bronze statue never stood again. But the afterimages left by that vast empire, yet still like a ghost, wandering every inch of Russia's full power cracks. This is truly a belated rebirth, or an old dream that will never be awakened. Perhaps only time will provide the final answer.